Welcome to the AU Scoop. I'm your host, Philip Dukes, aka Dukesthescoop. Check me out on Twitter and Instagram at Dukesthescoop. And please be sure to hit the like and subscribe button. All right, so for Auburn fans, excuse me, y'all, for Auburn fans who do subscribe to the channel, yesterday, major mess up where I recorded 40 minutes of a banger of a show talking about the post-spring depth chart and what people did in the spring in Auburn. And I think I had another screen open and the audio was terrible. So some of the stuff that I was able to predict yesterday, not even predict, but some of the things that were in that video for those that saw it who saw the transcript, some of that stuff came true last night, in particular, Braden Joyner to the portal. So I'm recording this at 10:10 Central Time, 11:10 Eastern, and we'll see how much of this stuff comes true. But what I wanted to do was start from the backside of the secondary of the defense and work all the way to the I guess the offensive backfield and talk about post spring, what happened in spring, who did well, who didn't, names that have emerged, and some names that have a little bit to be desired, and some names that could be considering the portal. So let's start. Well, before then, if you do want to support the channel, if you would like to see graphics up, well, I gotta run the bread up. So super chats are always welcome, and also in the subscription. If you want to be a subscriber to the channel, go to the description, look for the link, and you'll see the subscription link. All right, so let's get started. Let's start in the defensive secondary. I'd say the most, and you can ask anybody in Auburn, the person who proved the most in the spring and solidified their spot more than anybody will probably be Caleb Harris as the boundary safety. The safeties can be interchangeable, but he has his spot at the boundary, not only because of his IQ, but also because of his tackling ability. Sure tackler, and that's what you need at the boundary, is somebody who can come up, play in the box a lot, and also be responsible in coverage for the digs and the post when they do play middle of the field. Well, really, the post will probably go to the free, but the digs definitely, and some of those, and stopping those intermediate routes before they get to the deep end or get to the deep third. So definitely, I would say Caleb Harris did a really good job solidifying his spot at boundary. Right next to him at the field safety is where you probably have the most competition, as far as in the back end, and that's going to be between Sylvester Smith, who played a lot last year. And I'm hearing that, Sylvester Smith is a candidate for the portal. I'm not saying that he's not being pushed out, and I'm not saying that he wants to leave, but I think that he does feel like he's done enough to be a starter. So he's one of those guys that Auburn is going to try to make sure that they keep in the boat. But I think he wants to be a guaranteed starting position. I don't think he has a problem rotating. So we'll see how that works out. I just don't think that their spring didn't leave with a clear starter at the field safety position. And that is a position that you could see Auburn go to look for someone in the portal. Another guy who played a lot there, as far as at the field safety, would be Jacquez Robinson. Robinson, who's a big athletic guy, runs well, originally signed with Alabama, goes out to Colorado, comes to Auburn with Charles Kelly. He's another guy that wants to start. So I think really, I don't think that the attrition of the safety room is done in the transfer portal. I think you could see one or two more guys enter the portal. But if you don't, that's a good sign, because you do want to keep quality depth. Another guy that played at that field safety, and I think in this field safety role, everybody did some good things, is Kinsley Faustin. Faustin is another guy that he ran out with the ones. Like, all three of these guys played with the ones in the spring. Faustin, Sylvester Smith, and Jacquez Robinson all had their opportunity. Nobody did enough to kind of separate themselves, so that competition is going to be going strong into the fall. Um, Eric Winters is a guy that also repped out there. And he's someone who's going to be fighting for who I really thought would probably have been the number one guy to back up the boundary, which I think he could be because that third safety is going to need to know both. So I would say Sylvester Smith is someone that you do have to look at and say, okay, excuse me, not Sylvester Smith, but Eric Winters as someone who could come out and play a major role early. And we know that Auburn has undergone a youth movement over the past year or so, which I like. I think it's important for recruits and it's important for people to know that you do have an opportunity to play. And we know DJ Durkin and his offense is not scared to play a young guy. Tay Seymour is another guy, but he's more in that boundary role. So you have, and so in the boundary, I would probably say the depth chart will look like Caleb Harris for sure. Depending on the formation, either Eric Winters, Tay Seymour. You can also see Sylvester there, depending on who's how it shakes out. Jacquez Robinson also has the size to play there. Those safeties can be interchangeable, but I think right now, if the season started tomorrow, I think there's a world where you could see Caleb Harris and Eric Winters go first, with Winters being a rotational piece at both to give Harris a breather when needed. And also, if you want to get some different looks, you'll go with maybe Robinson Harris, or you could go Smith Harris. But that safety, that field safety position is one to look at where you could see a lot of turnover, or you could see it stay status quo. But it's far from solidified when it comes to field safety. So I think nobody took the reins of that position. Terrence Love was a guy who was repping out a lot with the twos. He got a little bit of run with the ones in the spring. A guy that wants to start a position. He's got some significant traction in the portal, so we wish him well. CJ Johnson, also a guy. I don't think he didn't really get a ton of reps with the ones at all. I think his highest reps was with the twos, so the writing was kind of on the wall for him. So he did also enter the portal. Another guy that I think find his way for sure. So much love and respect to him. All right, so when you leave the safeties, let's slide down to nickel, where that's where new boy Anquan Fagan shine. Now, there's a caveat to everything I said. Champ Anthony comes back full time. New boy could easily slide back up to that field safety, or where he showed a really, really high IQ and a nose for the ball. So, new boy, what I continue to hear over and over again is how smart of a football player he was, especially to be a true freshman. New boy had a very impressive spring. Being able to slide down into that nickel role where you are one of those guys who's taking multiple routes. The seam is yours. Being able to come up and be physical. He's not a guy who's known for his physicality, but he's a willing tackler, and I think that's really important. And he's someone that I do think could help you out at the free safety spot, but he does give you quality depth and somebody who will be able to play when Champ Anthony needs a breather. Champ Anthony is somebody who just his leadership as he recovers from that gruesome leg injury showed in the spring. He's gained the respect of all his teammates. They're waiting on him. They know that Champ Anthony is a real dude, but his absence allowed a lot of reps for new boy to get comfortable in that role at nickel. So I think that you have a lot that you can really build on from spring. Tyler Scott also got some nickel run, which I think is he's also recovering from an injury. So I'm not sure where he stands as far as if he's okay rotating, but I will say that he's had a really good recovery as he continues to get the full speed. So shout out to Tyler Scott as well, who can help you at that nickel role. And also, you got reps from other safeties who also came down to play that nickel or that star. And that's been, Terrence Love repped there some before he got into the portal. You saw Winters there a little bit at the beginning of the spring. So they rotated multiple bodies at that position. But if you were to just say who was the starter going into the fall, I think you would go with Champ Anthony, and I think the guy right behind him would be New Boy, depending on what else they had going on at that free safety spot or the field side safety. But being so multiple, where you've got different guys who can play that role, different safeties that played. I mean, they basically played. You basically got three safety roles: the nickel or the star. And I would call it the star, the boundary, and the field. They basically rotated like 9 guys through those 3 positions. And I think that multiplicity and that duality for all of the safeties has been like key for this defense and safeties coach TJ Rushing to find out what he's had. And I think it makes Auburn really a lot more dangerous when it comes to that safety room. So just to kind of round out the safeties, I think you have to go Caleb Harris at the boundary. Is really a toss-up at the field safety, and Champ Anthony at the nickel or the star coming back. And I think that really, I think really New Boy is probably your guy at the nickel and could possibly be your guy at the field. Winters did get a lot of valuable experience in the spring playing that field safety. So if you want probably your best athlete that can cover, if Champ comes back, I definitely think you probably see New Boy in the fall go get that free safety role if I were a betting man. But right now, I think one of the older guys, if the roster stays how it is, I think one of the older guys will probably be first out with a short leash, knowing that New Boy is kind of chomping hard at the bit to get on the field. All right, so let's go to cornerback. Cornerback in the secondary. That's where you saw J.C. Hart get in the portal. He was a guy that got quality reps. He was somebody who I think was probably a 4th corner where you need 2. Like if you go Jay Crawford field side, then you go Kenyon Lee in the boundary. Then you probably would have went Rayon Strader replacing Crawford, and you would have had mind drew a blank. But yeah, you would have had J.C. Hart behind Kenyon Lee. So J.C. Hart is gone, which provided an opportunity for Blake Woodby, but we'll get to that in a minute. So right now, your corners are going to be Jay Crawford and Kenyon Lee. I think both of those guys proved why they are the top 2 corners on this team in the spring. Jay Crawford in particular getting those quality reps against Cam Coleman, Eric Singleton, Malcolm Simmons every day in practice, sometimes even following them to the slot. I think when you have a wide receiver core that is so explosive and that can hit you in a multitude of ways, I think by being able to get those reps every day, and especially towards the end of camp where the defense started dominating, I think that's where you saw the quality of the corners that you have. Jay Crawford is more of a technician, but I think he surprised a lot of people with the speed training he did in the offseason, where you're not going to see balls go over his head. You really didn't see that his freshman year, and I think that's something that he wanted to work on, and he's worked on it. So we're talking about the makers of a first-round corner. When it comes to size, speed, effort, tackling ability, somebody who could play the star role, who could play the nickel role if you need him to, could play the dime. Like it's so much that you can do with Jay Crawford, and I think you're going to see them experiment with Jay Crawford all over the field this year. Same thing for Kenyon Lee. I think Kenyon Lee did get some reps in the spring. He also had a good spring. He had some reps in the spring at the slot corner. He also is a guy who tackles well that you can send on the blitz. I think his physicality is probably his best part of his game, and being a sticky guy in man coverage on the perimeter. That I think that Ken had such a dog-like mentality that the way that he competes can make up for his lack of height. And it's not like Kenyon Lee is short. Like he's 5'10", he's really 5'11". Like, to be honest, he's right in that 5'10", 5'11" range. So I don't think that he's anyone who you worry about as far as leaving on the island, because they threw him in the grease as a freshman. So I think at the cornerback positions, you're pretty good. Now, the interesting caveat to this is Rayon Strader. Rayon Strader came from Miami of Ohio, had a slow start to camp, but picked it up as camp started to as camp evolved and camp continued to go. He kind of as it went on, he stepped up, and going to a place where you already had 2 starters cemented, there, he really didn't rep a lot at that star role. So that's a name that I will monitor with the transfer portal. It's great if Auburn is able to hang on to him, but he's someone that I do know, as I talk to people, he could be a candidate because he wants a starting role. He believes he's a 1 corner, and Auburn just happens to have 3 1s. Ken Lee and Jay Crawford are definitely 3 are 1s. So he got a lot of valuable reps. As when Jay Crawford had like a little nagging injury, I believe it was a hamstring, I'm not sure, just a small nagging injury where they just held him out because they knew what he could do. He had proven it in the spring. Strader stepped in there and then showed some things that kind of gave him the confidence to feel like, I can do this as a 1. So we'll see what happens with Rayon Strader, but like definitely someone who took advantage of the reps when he had them later in camp. Another guy who took advantage of reps was Blake Woodby. So right now, I think Blake Woodby is your 4th guy that rotates in after Strader. And if Strader were to go, I would say Woodby would be your 3rd guy. Had a great spring, a tad undersized, but he makes up for it with his competitiveness, the way he gets his hands on you early. He loves playing man-to-man coverage. Some things, like like you say in the spring, if you were at the spring game, you saw Perry Thompson go over top of him one time. It's just nothing you can do, but the only way for him to go was up because he gets to your back pocket. Woodby is a guy I know DJ Durkin is crazy about him, the way he competes. And I think that he's a future star in the secondary, and that's one of those evaluations that Auburn absolutely hit on. Had an amazing spring from all accounts. So I definitely feel like that's somebody that you will want to look forward to going into the season as somebody who can help you early as another member of the youth movement at Auburn, especially in the secondary. Amon Lane Gaines, excuse me. He's another guy who acquitted for himself well. Got a few more reps than maybe even he was expecting this year, and did a decent job in the spring. So yeah, I'd say right now I don't know if he's going to be on the top end of that rotation, but he did do some good things in the spring, and it was noticed some of those things that he did do. All right, so that's corner. So I still feel like Jay Crawford, Ken Lee, status quo at corner. After that, I think it's going to be interesting to see over these next 10 days any activity that Auburn has, whether that's bringing people in or actually somebody may be leaving. But right now, when I talk to people, I think you got to replace 5 to 6 DBs at Auburn already. I mean, what you got? We know that we got 3 already in the portal. We got a couple that are injured. So, and based off last year, the guys who went in or graduated, that's a lot of DBs that you have to replace from in 1 year. So I think they may look for a little more help in the transfer portal in the secondary. So I will watch that secondary in the transfer portal. All right, let's go to linebacker. I think Robert Woodger Jr. is a guy who solidified his space as the Mike linebacker. Doesn't have a ton of experience, but he did get some run. Maybe not the athletic guy, but the most athletic guy, but he does have some tools. He does have a toolbox that he can use. And I think that he did enough by helping get people lined up to feel like you can green dot him. He can get people lined up. He has enough of a voice for him to be your Mike backer, where you don't have to have elite athleticism in this defense. You need to be a short tackler, and you need to make sure that you are where you're supposed to be, read your keys, and your run fits got to be nasty. So I think he's proven that. So shout out to Woodger, man. Another guy that I think a lot of people are going to be excited about is Elijah Melendez. I don't know if this guy can even put on any more good weight. I mean, when you talk about a prototype linebacker, he looks the part. I believe he's damn near 230 pounds now. 6'2", legit 6'2", long arm guy, and he will hit Joe. Another guy that they said that I want to make sure too, got to give Eric Winters his props because they said he was coming downhill. So shout out to Eric Winters. But Elijah Melendez is another guy. And we're talking about at the traditional Mike backer spot. He's someone that Melendez also did rep a little bit at weak side, but I think that's where his home will be. And he's going to play. Elijah Melendez had a really good spring, earned the respect of his teammates. So I think that's a position where I think your biggest winner at linebacker in the spring, especially at the Mike spot, probably is Melendez because he's definitely, I can see him he's going to be on the 2 deep when the season starts. Barring, even if they bring in a transfer, I think that's somewhere that you got it, that he's going to play. Weak side linebacker. All right, DeMarcus Riddick missed a ton of time in the spring, which allowed Debo Atkins, Xavier Atkins, his nickname Debo. He's someone that took advantage of his reps. A guy that Dirk recruited when he was at Texas A&M, tad undersized, maybe about 5'11". I think that he needs to get to that 215, 220 range for him to show his true impact. So, when they do run duo at him or they do run power to his side, he's able to bang with some guards. But as far as his tenacity, as far as running and hitting, yeah, you don't. There's not a lot left to be desired from Xavier Atkins. Heard he had a good productive spring. Really wants it, from what I hear. He's a guy that wants to be on the field. Really has bought into the process, and he's a guy that you can bite on, from what I hear. As far as he's a guy that DJ Durkin can coach hard at the linebacker position, and so I think that's going to pay dividends for him. But I think the starter. Going into the season at post spring, you got to go. You got to go to Marcus Riddick, and I think, but I think Atkins has earned his spot in the rotation. If he gets that weight to where it needs to be, coming out of LSU, I think he's earned a spot. Another guy, Bryce Diaz, they call him Juice. Bryce had a really good spring as well, and I think he found his way in the rotation. He was a guy who played some safety. But I think he was always considered to be a linebacker fit for Auburn. A lot of other people had said he could be a big box safety with the way that he runs. But he showed some bite. He showed some fight. He was able to showcase his IQ. And I think that at the linebacker room, there isn't a ton of experience. I know that, but you got some athletes. And I think that if you get the defensive line play that you need, you'll be okay. I think those are the main guys that you would really have to consider when it comes to that weak side spot. So at the linebacker position, I think season starts today is probably DeMarcus Riddick at the wheel, and Robert Woodyard at your mic, with Elijah Melendez and Debo Atkins, Xavier Atkins, with those two pushing for sure. So I think that was your first 4 out when it comes to linebacker. All right, so let's go to the buck, the edge. Everybody loves the juice from the edge rushers. Kieran Crawford, man, they said there was one practice they could not block him this spring. I mean, I think it was maybe practice 12, if I'm not mistaken. One of those after the scrimmage. Actually, the scrimmage game, the first scrimmage, he also got off too. But they said there were some days where you just couldn't block him. And I think Kieran Crawford is someone who's poised to break out. So definitely one of the big winners from the spring has been Kieran Crawford and solidifying his spot. But another guy, Chris Murray, came from Sam Houston State. I talked about it. The guys love him. He's another guy that they say that this guy really had a good spring, and you got to be happy for Auburn to be able to have that juice at the pass rusher position there, because we all know that your team is better when you can get juice off the edge, And I think they definitely have that. And so Kieran Crawford and Chris Murray are two guys that had good springs, both of them. Chris Murray, they say he's built like a Greek god, a guy that and a guy who's shown what he can do in the weight room as well. So I think you really got a 1A, 1B when it comes to the edge rush position. Another guy who did really well on the edge this year when he saw some time there was Jared Smith, the true freshman. Jared Smith, whether he was playing defensive end or he was playing the buck role, either one, this was a guy that I think he's really going to be a defensive end, but he showed some juice when he did get some reps over there at Buck. So shout out to Jared Smith. There are some days where I get phone calls and say, "Hey man, they ain't miss on that D line." We're gonna talk about the D line as a whole, but I just wanted to say that he did show some juice there. I think Jamonte Waller is the guy that you want to see some more from. Still recovering from an injury. I will monitor that situation as well just to see, just how he continues to develop. But right now, I don't think he's in a position to help you immediately in the fall. If there's any young guy who's in position to help you at the buck position, is probably Jared Smith, who's also going to be able to help you at defensive end. And mind you, based on the scheme, you can see these guys at end or buck. But getting to the end, we all know Keldrick Falk is the guy, first round pick. But after him, Amaris Williams had a really good spring. I think he proved some things there. So as far as his length may have left some to be desired to some people, but he really kind of stepped up, and he's been working with some of the younger guys. So I think, and he's a guy that you could put at either role, but Amaris Smith is a guy who had a good spring and did the most with his reps. Also, it's another place where Jared Smith shined at the end. Like I'm telling you, Jared Smith has proven that he's going to play this year. Mark my words, you're going to see Jared Smith. That's a guy who I continue to hear great things about as far as being a younger guy, about knowing that you hit on that defensive line. And so as we talk about the young guys on the defensive line, let's talk about Jared Smith, but we can go over to the defensive tackle position, and we can go to nose. I think if you start at nose tomorrow, you got Quintrell, Jameis Travis. He made the most of his reps. A lot of people penciled in Dallas Walker, the transfer from Western Kentucky. But I think those two guys are who you start tomorrow. Malik Archer and Jordan Crawford. Do not be surprised if you see a lineup towards the middle of the season and you got Jared Smith, Jordan Crawford and Malik Archer. Malik Archer, baller, 1,000%. They knew it. The guys on the team know it. Malik Archer is going to be a real guy. Somebody that you beat Ohio State for. You kept Florida off of them. You won. Malik Archer is someone who had a really good spring and impressed a lot of people. I think Crawford is I think he's somebody who flashed so hard at some practices that you could just see that. And a lot of people thought he may have been the best guy in that defensive line class. But Jordan Crawford is another guy, when you talk to people in the program, that they're a ton excited about. So that D-line. So, yes, at nose tackle, I think you go out and you do have to start at nose. You probably start Quintrell first. But don't be surprised if you see one of those. If Auburn needs to generate some juice and you need to fire some things up, don't be surprised if you see either Malik Archery or Jordan Crawford at that nose tackle role. They both played it in the spring. They both did well. Malik Archery also did well at the traditional D tackle role. Your first guy is going to be Malik Blockton, who just continued to prove that, even though he may not have had the prototypical size, he is a baller, and he showed that as a true freshman. So that's your first guy out. But right behind him, it could be Malik Archery. It could be Zy Walker, who has the experience. But I think Archery and Yeah, it's gonna be hard to keep Malik Archer out that field, man. So he's gonna get some reps there. I'm telling you right now, Malik Archer, Jordan Crawford, Jared Smith, they play this year, 1,000%. Barring the injury, they had really, really impressive springs. So we went from the safeties to the defensive line, and that's your defensive post-spring recap for Auburn. Offense ain't gonna take that long. We can run through the offense. All right, so we know tight end, basically, you pretty much know what you got. Preston Howard is gonna be probably your most likely guy as a pass catcher. And then I would say, Brandon Frazier, B. Fraze is your guy. He's going to be your starter. So saw some things that you kind of like out of Preston Howard, but you really, if the right tight end came available, I think you would see Auburn maybe make a move for the right tight end. But if it's not like a top tier guy or a guy they know has if you don't get a guy the caliber of Rivaldo Fairweather, then you probably don't see them make a move at the tight end. They're not just going to bring a guy in just to have it. I think let's go to the offensive line. So we started left tackle. Xavier Chaplin was out. Somebody who they are really excited about, but has some stuff to clean up. So as far as medically, so he sat out, which gave Too Tall Miller the reps at left tackle. If you watch this show, early on, and there was a guy in the comments, he was just giving me hell. It was like, oh, you said Too Tall was going to be a guard. I know he'll tackle. Well, I did find out he did rep some at guard, and I was 1,000% the first person to say that. So he did rep some at guard, but he moved back to tackle based on the injury to Chaplin. So that's going to be interesting to watch. But yeah, Too Tall right now, he's probably a swing tackle when Chaplin comes back, but he could go to guard. But he's really your swing offensive lineman. They said he did okay at guard. I didn't hear he killed it, but I didn't hear he looked bad. Somebody who gives you it gives you a different physical profile there. But I think at left tackle, if spring ended today, then you definitely go. If the season started tomorrow, you definitely go Xavier Chaplin with Too Tall right behind him. Left guard. I think at left guard, you got Dylan Wade for sure is your left guard to start. He had a pretty good spring. Against some of those younger guys, you can see his experience shine from what I heard. So he's a guy who can use your athleticism against you with some of that push-pull type deal. So he's a guy that he 1,000%. I think if you start tomorrow, he's your guard. DeAndre Carter is a guy who he still has something to be desired. He's a mammoth player, but you saw flashes. He did flash in the spring. I think enough that if you get in the pinch, you got to start him. So yeah, definitely DeAndre Carter did enough. At the center spot, Connor Lew was out, so Braden Joyner. And yesterday I said on the show that never came out. I know y'all gonna be like, Deuce, you just saying it now, but I said he was gonna be a transfer portal candidate because he wanted to start, and he did indeed hit the transfer portal. So he repped out the most at center, but I think Auburn's gonna be fine with Connor Lew, but he played a lot last year, so he really is like, I deserve a chance to play and play more reps. I think he's gonna seek that out, and from early returns he's going to have a hell of a market. So shout out to Braden, aka the franchise joiner, and good luck on your travels. Right guard, Jeremiah Wright's got that locked down. Just continuing to show that he's the guy by being able to keep his that nastiness, man. Now he's a guy who gave some of the young guy, another guy who was able to meet some of that youthful exuberance that he saw from the young guys with just sheer nastiness, and pretty much solidify himself as one of the leaders on that offensive line. So shout out to him. And at right tackle, man, I think a lot of people were surprised with the play of Mason Murphy, who played a lot better than some people thought he was. Murphy, the transfer from USC, gave up more sacks than you would have liked last year at right tackle. play some guard too, a versatile guy. But he really played well in the spring. So I think that he's going to do well. And when they put, going up against some of those guys he went up against, and sometimes they would switch, when you saw guys who were playing at the Buck a play or two before, switch over to the end where he would be at the right tackle. I think you saw a lot there from Mason Murphy. Footwork was good, strong guy. So yeah, definitely Mason Murphy helps you solidify that offensive line. So if the season starts tomorrow, I think the first team offensive line is Big X from Virginia Tech, Xavier Chaplin, Dylan Wade, center's going to be Connor Lew, right guard Jeremiah Wright, right tackle Mason Murphy. And I think your first two guys up, your sixth guy is 1,000% going to be too tall, whether it be guard or tackle. And the guy behind him that I think can help you is going to be the guard, which is DeAndre Carter. All right, so the offensive line had a good spring. Well, they had a better spring. I would say the offensive line did really good running the ball, as far blocking the run. And one of those recipients for that great run blocking that you got, especially on the interior, especially on the interior, was Damari Austin. Damari Austin pretty much let it be known and proved with his play that he's going to be your 1A running back. And really not even 1A, man. I mean, he's your one. You're going out, it's not going to be like rotating series like you've seen him previously. Damari Austin is your starter. He put on the weight, he held on to the ball, he ran physically, he ran behind his pass, continued to be a leader, and he proved why he's the guy that you go into battle with. So shout out to Damari. I heard nothing but good things about him. It said he's in that mode where he's smart enough to know when to get three, to know when, okay, instead of trying to push for a longer game, let me go ahead and get 6 yards. Let me just keep the chains moving. And he was a guy that there were times where you could run the ball 8 straight times and he was getting positive yardage, and there was nothing the defense could do about it. So Damari Austin is someone who really had a great spring. You didn't see him much in the spring game, but he proved, like Coach Freeze is one of those guys is like, look, if you prove it already, he don't even like the spring game. Or the spring showcase or whatever it is. Well, he wasn't going to be leaving guys in there long, and Damari Austin is one of the guys that he got out of there when it came to team. So shout out to Damari Austin for another great spring. Jeremiah Cobb had a good spring. Now, I think this is where you see the Thunder. I think Damari Austin and Jeremiah Cobb, even though they are a lot more similar in size than the traditional Thunder and Lightning pairing, they're basically going to be another Thunder and Lightning pairing. I want to say maybe like a Trey Mason, Corey Grant type deal. Am I saying that right? Hold on, let me check that for you. Yeah, so you guys remember, like, I think, was it 2013? Yeah, that Trey Mason, Corey Grant combo was lethal. I think that's what you can see, because you got a guy like Damari Austin who can get you the tough yards, but then you got Jeremiah Cobb who broke multiple long runs in the spring and showed that he could be a home run hitter. So Cobb added some good weight as well, and while he may not be as powerful as Austin, what he does do is when he's gone, when he caught that crease in the spring, he was out of there. Multiple long runs. So shout out to Jeremiah Cobb for being able to step into this role and really own it, and give the running backs, give Coach Nick some things to think about when it came to who was your starter. But I just think Damari was too strong in the spring for Cobb to supplant him as the lead back, but he's going to play a lot. And the one X factor that we have here is Darrell Robinson from UConn. He's somebody that can really play. A lot of schools were disappointed that he went to Auburn. I know a couple of coaches that said, man, if I had that guy, he's a 1,000-yard rusher at my school. So Robinson being your third guy and willing to come in and be a part of a rotation, I think Auburn is in really good hands. And they said Alvin Henderson did some good things as far as some tough running too. So the true freshman. So, but yeah, I think your first three out, 1, 2, and 3 would be Damari Alston, Jeremiah Cobb, and Darrell Robinson. All right, let's go to the wide receivers. Eric Singleton came out and showed you everything that he is, why he was the number 1 ranked receiver in the portal, why Auburn probably made a little bit of a mistake early on when they recruited him the first time, by not pushing harder earlier. But Eric Singleton, they're gonna use him a multitude of ways. Punt return, kick return, catching the ball out the backfield, rocket motion, jet motion. He's primarily going to play the slot, deep shots, intermediate, drag, bubble, tunnel, you name it. Eric Singleton will be doing it for Auburn. He's your probably, and it's so crazy how good the wide receiver room, because how good the wide receiver room is, because some of the ways that, imagine the way that Coach Freeze talked about how he had to get Malcolm Simmons the ball last year. Well, now you got Eric Singleton to do that with, who's faster than anybody on the team. That's documented. Talking about a 10-2, 10-3 guy in high school in the 100. Actually ran track for Georgia Tech in the 60 meters. So now you've got a guy like Singleton, so explosive, proved it. Every cornerback every DB that I talked to in the spring literally said it's legit. The speed is legit. And the route running is so good that you can't just play him like he's a track guy running football. He's a wide receiver that's fast enough to run track. That's what Eric Singleton is. And when I talk to NFL scouts and agents and people, like they're fawning over him. Like they think that Eric Singleton can have a good enough season to where if the offense gets to roll, he can be a first-round pick. So shout out to Eric Singleton. Another guy who people have first-round aspirations for is Cam Coleman, who just continued to be Cam Coleman. Another spring where he was dominant, going against primarily Jay Crawford, who's a freshman All-American corner, one of the best in the country. And these guys are just making each other better. They had so many. You can even go back to the high school bowl games, the All-Star bowl games where Jay Crawford has the one-handed pick over Coleman. Like, then Coleman gets off in the spring game last year. Like, these guys are going to be tied at the hip. They make each other better. They like competing against each other. And I think that's what really is going to help Cam Coleman become that next tier of wide receiver, where last year he was, the number 1 wide receiver in the country, depending on who you ask. Of course, Jeremiah Smith, when he came out of high school, of course, Jeremiah Smith was 1 overall, but Cam Coleman was right there. And some people thought it was like a Julio Jones, AJ Green type thing. So, and then when you talk about your 2 guys, you've got Cam Coleman on the outside, then you got Eric Singleton on this side. And then you got a guy like Malcolm Simmons, right, who you could play in the slot, you could play outside, who's probably your best athlete on the team, and really is he's so dynamic with the football that you lose sight of the fact that he's probably your best safety on the team too. A lot of people forget how dynamic he was in high school, and I know a lot of people that feel like he can move over and really help you really help you at safety right now. So when you have somebody who has the mentality of a safety that's playing a wide receiver, catches the ball, you can give him the ball a multitude of ways also. You just got so much weaponry in that room. So in a 3 wide receiver set, which you probably start out with a tight end, I think your first 3 out are definitely going to be Eric Singleton, Cam Coleman, and Malcolm Simmons. Now, Auburn did a lot in the spring in 4 wide receiver sets. And that battle for that 4th wide receiver set, that 4th wide receiver in those sets, that was a very, very heated battle between early on. Horatio Fields was the guy. Transferred, big body, came from Wake Forest, had some production last year. He was the guy who you said, okay, that's your 4th guy. That's your first receiver up. And then all of a sudden, you get this freshman, Sam Turner. What the heck? And I got a 2 more horn. Last year, you can go back and you look at anytime that I was asked about Sam Turner, whether it would be with Josh Newberger on 3, whether it be when on any of my shows or on 3, or whether it be with Zach Blackerby or Locked On Auburn, shout out to Zach, I always was like, Sam Turner is that guy. Didn't get the recognition, but playing at Hustle Link, probably the best 707 in Georgia over the last couple of years, he was going up against guys like Jay Crawford and Ken Lee and KJ Bolden. Like that's the program that he came from. And he's just a guy who stayed down in Southwest DeKalb because he could have went anywhere. Could have went to Beaufort, could have went to Milton, could have went to Gainesville, but he decided to stay at Southwest DeKalb. But when I tell you about talented, I think now the world knows, especially the world of Auburn knows, of how talented, what a spring he did have. But the guy who people were looking for that came on late was Perry Thompson. Perry struggled with probably what you would call concentration drops. And there were some practices where he would drop. They went to him 2 to 3 times in a row. And once his focus was off, he dropped them all. But man, when his focus was on, you saw the potential. You saw that big body receiver. You saw the Julio Jones comparison. You saw the guy who could take a tunnel screen and go the length of the field. You saw a guy who could throw the ball up in the air. He can go get it at his highest point. You saw a guy who can get a blocking assignment and look like a tight end on a perimeter. And in the spring game, he proved it again. So shout out to Perry Thompson for continuing to believe in himself and believe in his skills. And the way that he finished was the way that 1,000% he that he was doing what he was capable of. So I think that race right there for that fourth wide receiver is going to be between, and I say fourth wide receiver as in when they go to 4 wide, which you are going to see, they ran a lot of 4 wide in the spring, so be ready for it. When you go 4 wide, is it Sam Turner? Is it Horatio Fields? Is it Perry Thompson? Those guys may rotate, and as they get in certain positions, when you give a guy a breather after a big play or, there's potential injury, you're going to have guys that go into certain places. So Sam Turner is a guy who can replace everybody. And they ran these guys at different positions. So you don't know who will be the first up in what position. And so I like to call it a fourth receiver. And I think that's your biggest battle right now going into the fall, is that all 3 of those that I named have shown themselves capable of being that fourth guy. All right, last but not least, we got to talk about the quarterback position, where I think this is the best quarterback room we have seen at Auburn, probably top to bottom since, I don't know, maybe Daniel Cobb and Jason Campbell. I don't know. It's probably the best we've seen in a long time. When you talk about a guy like Jackson Arnold, and I want to apologize to him. And I want to apologize to him because there was so much buzz about Deuce Knight. People lost sight of how well he performed this spring. He was on time with his throws. He was able to show the mobility that people forget about. And you saw the arm talent that made him an Elite 11 guy. So Jackson Arnold had a good spring. I think it was overshadowed by the excitement of Deuce Knight. But by no means, when you go into the first game of the season, I think the ideology is for someone who's been in the fire, who's been in the road on the SEC, to be going into a Friday night primetime game against Baylor in Waco, Texas. I think you got to have a guy like Jackson Arnold to start it off, for sure. So I think that's your first quarterback out. He didn't do anything to not be the starting quarterback. He took the majority of the reps with the ones when he was available. And so I think going into the season, Jackson Arnold is your starter. But man, oh man, the potential of Deuce Knight was the story of the spring. I think the 2 stories of the spring got to be Deuce Knight and Sam Turner. Those 2 guys hooked up a million times. It was almost like every day, 2 touchdowns for Sam. Who threw him? Deuce. Like, they really got off. But Deuce Knight came in bigger than you thought he was going to be. And I think the biggest surprise was he was more accurate than you thought he was going to be. Layering throws. I don't know if it's something just the young guys are picking up earlier than most people are, but the way that he was layering passes, from what I saw, was amazing. When you talk about being able to get the ball behind the linebacker and in front of the safety at his height and his trajectory, he's a special talent. And I think that, he's I remember when Gus Malzahn said, Bo Nix is going to bring a championship to Auburn. That's one of those statements that you feel like somebody will make about Deuce Knight. You already knew the athleticism was going to be off the charts, but I think the arm talent was something that people slept on. And even more than that, the leadership ability. Deuce Knight is a leader. When you look at the people that he hangs with, just follow his social media. He hangs with Damari Austin, a senior, who's been on the leadership council the last 2 years. He's making himself available to everybody, building relationships, and off the field they respect him, and on the field they also respect him. So Deuce Knight just had a heck of a spring. So right now, if we just were to go down the offense, I think you go out quarterback Jackson Arnold with Deuce Knight right behind him. I think running back, you go to Damari Austin. I think wide receiver starting from left to right, you go Cam Coleman, Eric Singleton, Malcolm Simmons, Brendan Fraser as your tight end, and then left to right offensive tackles, you got to go Xavier Chaplin, you go Dylan Wade, you go Connor Lew, you go right guard Jeremiah Wright, and you go Mason Murphy. All right, guys, that's your post-spring wrap-up. I know it was long, but I want to make sure we dove through every position. Man, I'm glad you guys stuck with me. If you got any other Auburn content that you want to see or you want to talk about, please drop it in the comments. I'm glad I'm able to get this out. Apologies for the audio troubles yesterday, but we'll make sure that doesn't happen again. All right, guys, man, that's my time. I appreciate you. Deuce the Scoop. I am out.